Hey everyone, it's Kong. I wanted to talk about the dev panel, specifically some of the changes they showed us in the new Evolved Mode presentation. I'll start with my overall thoughts and expectations going in, based on the short tease that they gave us in the keynote. Initially I was worried that reducing the number of buttons on the hotbar was going to be the whole focus of Evolved Mode. I'm a controller main, and I don't really have a problem with the number of buttons I have to press. That said, I do fully acknowledge and support them foregrounding accessibility concerns, so trimming isn't a bad thing if it's done right. Fundamentally, I was hoping for something with a little bit more of a battle system design philosophy behind it, rather than just trimming and tidying up. So that was my main expectation and worry going into the intro of this presentation. The first job they showed was Paladin, which happens to be my main. And honestly, strictly in terms of hotbar compression versus deeper combat design, this one was probably the least promising of a showcase. Don't get me wrong, some of the compression is nice, but it didn't exactly feel evolved. Putting the 1-2-3 combo on the same button is expected. Situational buttons that change skills depending on context is a much cooler idea. So shield bash and shield lob on the same button is cool, for example. Gap closing to an ally to cover them is a cool idea, although I did notice that intervene didn't do damage anymore in the demo. In fact, on that note, it doesn't seem like they wanted Paladin weaving for DPS anymore at all. Fight or Flight, Expiation, and Circle of Scorn were missing in action. The whole AoE combo was missing in action for that matter. Maybe that can be chalked up to it being an early dev build, or they simply didn't have everything on the demo hotbar at the time. So that makes sense. They did say that Paladin was one of the easier jobs already, or had one of the easier rotations, so they didn't need to make as many hotbar adjustments here, which to me does imply that they're trying to trim down the hotbars in the interest of making jobs easier to play. The most interesting thing they showed in this section, the closest to being a battle system change, is the addition of counteractions. Although I think that way of describing them kind of makes them sound like more than what they actually are. In the demo, they tried to make it sound almost like a timing-based parry and counter from an action game. Realistically, Sheltron will trigger a proc, and then you spend that proc doing your counteraction. The Blackest Knight already does something mechanically similar. The only difference here is that when during Sheltron you get hit determines what proc you get. Ultimately, these little counteractions will tie into their plans to divide the tank roles into main tanks and off tanks, with the main tanks, Paladin and the new 8.0 job, having more personal mitts and counters, and the off tanks, so Warrior, Dark Knight, and Gunbreaker, having more party mitts and debuffs. That is a whole other topic, so let's tackle that one later. The second job they showed was Dragoon. This one dramatically trimmed down the number of buttons, reducing the job's long GCD chain combo and plentiful weaves into a more basic pattern of doing positionals to unlock a long combo, then following that up with a chain of super finishers. Giving you multiple jumps with True North built in is a nice balance to the mandatory positionals to open your chain. The Sky High finisher taking you off the screen for a good chunk of time and granting damage reduction is a nice effort towards giving Dragoon a real old-school Final Fantasy Dragoon feel. This rotation feels like a much bigger update than Paladin's. It's also a good example of their stated desire to make the jobs feel unique by giving them a staple skill that feels like this is what this job is. For Dragoon, that is Big Jump. I just realized that I forgot to switch my little tank stance off for my Dragoon stance. My main worry here is how they're going to tackle the other melees. Like, is Monk just going to have all their buttons and weaves compressed into a couple of long chain combos on 1 or 2 buttons, followed by a big punch finisher? There's a danger that this hotbar simplification and one-button combo focus will make the jobs feel more alike rather than more unique. I'm not saying I 100% think this is the case, and we didn't see multiple jobs in the same role to compare. We didn't see another melee, we didn't see any casters. I do know that they're acutely aware that this will be a worry, so I'm sure they work to avoid it. Notably missing in this melee section is the job's party buff. Just as Paladin's counters hinted at the overall tank role split explained later in the presentation, this Dragoon streamline gave us a preview of another major change, which is the removal of the 2-minute party buffs across the board. Yoshi P acknowledged that the 2-minute meta severely limited their creativity in boss encounter design, and contributed to feeling staleness, where every fight involved lining up bursts under buffs and then doing a bunch of filler. The third job they showed was White Mage, and I'm not going to forget to switch into healer stance for this one. There we go. So a caveat here, healer is by far my least played role, so it's the one I know least about, and I won't be able to go into as much detail about the impact of these changes. Just as a side note, one of the first things they said was that they're using White Mage as an example here because it's a more accessible job, so it's an easier on-ramp into the evolved side of things. To me, that hints that other healers might be getting bigger, more impactful, or more complex changes to their kits. Certainly Astro will be changing. Again. So their main stated purpose here is that they didn't want healing, specifically GCD healing, to feel like a punishment. This is a healer, so you shouldn't feel like healing is taking you away from what you're supposed to be doing, that is, max DPS. With that in mind, they did a couple things to try to alleviate this feeling. GCD heals will fill a gauge, which you can then cash in by using a DPS spell, whose potency is directly connected with how much healing you've done. They've also removed the cast time from most of White Mage's attack skills, letting you run and gun, or run and glare. I doubt this applies to Holy, obviously. They say this makes it easier to focus on healing, since you're spending less time casting attacks. I'm not really sure how that works out. Healer mains, let me know in the comments. Another change they talked about isn't mechanical, but aesthetic. Since you spend so much of your time spamming the same spells, they made the spell animations look slightly different when they're repeated. This ends up just being kinda cute, not really changing anything, but I guess you feel like you're doing more things in your rotation. Finally, we get a look at our physical range DPS, which is Bard, and that means I'm switching back to DPS mode. There we go. The first thing that jumped out at me when Bard came up on the screen was... where are all the buttons? It looks like there's literally just 3 songs and 1 basic attack on this hotbar. Songs feel much more central here in this redesign. You fill up a performance gauge to build stacks, which you then use to trigger a song of your choice. In addition to a unique party support buff per song, either regen or shields or movement speed, the song you perform also unlocks a string of specific attacks. Mage's Ballad gives access to a 1-2 combo of damage over time skills, Army's Paean gives access to a multi-hit combo, and Wanderer's Minuet gives access to a combo with a huge finisher. These song-specific actions are all on the same couple buttons. So basically, whichever song you choose unlocks different moves on the, song DPS buttons. This is a massive rotational change that I think exemplifies their intended impact of removing the 2-minute meta. Instead of having to line up specific songs with buff windows, resulting in a really rigid rotation, you can now allegedly perform your songs in the order you see fit, depending on which buff the party needs at any given time. That's what they say anyway. Obviously, we'll have to put it through the paces in high-end combat to see if it ends up feeling that open, or if there's just another solid, proper rotation that ends up coming to the surface. Bard also gets what I think is probably the change that feels closest to something like a battle system evolution. Their repelling shot retreat move is replaced with a 3-charge directional jump shot, so you can attack while jumping forward or back or to the sides, depending on the direction that you're pressing when you use the move. And this results in a cool-looking Monster Hunter-like dynamic move. I think this one does a great job of capitalizing on a ranged DPS's intended feeling of mobility, and it should make Bard gameplay feel unique and immersive. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the changes they've shown for these 4 jobs, and overall the direction they appear to be going with this new Evolved mode. I have more to say on the tank split, and on the future of Evolved mode with new jobs coming in 8.0 and beyond, but I'll save that for another video. In the meantime, what did you think of these 4 showcases? Were you optimistic? Was there anything you didn't like? Leave a comment and let us know your thoughts.